Recording.
Excellent. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is James Burnham. I am the Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation Coordinator for the state of Minnesota. And basically, that means my job is to get more people out hunting and fishing. With me today, I've got Craig Kiger, my Northwoods guru and spiritual advisor. His official title is Shooting Sports Coordinator, and he is instrumental in our shooting sports efforts. And then we also have Amber Ladd with us today, and she is a conservation officer. And Amber, I'll let you introduce yourself really quick. Did we lose Amber?
She's on mute.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I'm a conservation officer up in Aiken County. So I've been on since 2012, and yeah.
Fantastic. And Craig, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Craig Kiger, shooting
Can you
sports
hear me
coordinator.
now?
Yep, we got you, Amber. Yep.
So welcome, everybody.
All right. So this is all about getting ready for the Firearms deer opener. That's on Saturday. So we're going to really quickly run through a short slideshow just to kind of cover some broad bases, but we really the whole point of this is if there are questions or if there are questions that you have in the audience that you can ask us to hopefully allow for some clarifications, or if there's anything that you're looking for, that's really kind of the more the point of this. So we kind of want to go over some basic stuff and then get into if you've got questions. So what we're going to cover today, I really want to kind of go over what resources we've got for deer hunters that are out there. We've been talking about it off and on through the fall, but this is really trying to consolidate and put everything into one place. Touch briefly on what's new for 2021. The good news is there's not a whole lot that's new. So if you were up to speed and prepared for 2020, you're pretty much there for 2021. We've just got a few tweaks and changes to go over. Some important rules and regulations that are just kind of good. I mean, they're statewide. They apply to almost any hunting situation. But then we're also going to talk about some deer specific ones. And then a quick overview of how to buy a license, because I think that's one of the things that I know as a new transplant to Minnesota a few years ago, I got hung up on it. So I want to make sure that if you're out there and this is your first year buying a license, that we kind of go over that so that you know. And then we'll get into the questions and answers. Some of the resources we have for deer hunting here in Minnesota, we have a tremendous amount of online information. Our information team has been working overtime to get stuff up, to get everything that you need to get to into one space. Our hunting page is where you want to start. So if you just do an internet browser search for MN-DNR deer hunting, it'll take you to our landing page, and there's news and notices with information about like specific, like what the latest thing that's come out. If there's something that's changed recently, that's where you're going to be seeing that. We've got our seasons and hunts posted there, what our permit areas are. We've got CWD links. Kelsey Lashar and I had a nice long conversation about CWD last week. That is up and posted on our website. But if you need more information, they're there. What our licenses are, the regulations, what special hunts are out there, our learn to hunt programming, and more management info. So we've got a lot on that landing page. It's a great place to start. One of the things that is new for this year is we have rules and regulations translated. So all of our rules and regs are translated for the Spanish language, Hmong, Somali. We have entire regulations books that are in those. If you need a hardcover or a hard copy of those, please contact our information center. We can get those out to you. They're all available online as PDFs. We also have some information in the Karen language, but that's pretty much restricted to our maps at this point. So we don't have the full rules and regs book for that, but we're working on it. New this year is also our Make a Plan tool. We have all of our DPAs laid out, and you basically, you can just do a search for our MN-DNR Make a Plan. It'll take you to that page. You can find the DPA, the deer permit area that you're hunting, and you get information to updates, maps, and information for that specific region, as well as information on, we have new CWD updates on our website. So if you just do a search for MNDNR CWD, you'll get to our CWD page that's updated very, very recently. That hunting page also has a link to our Learn to Deer Hunt webinar series. That's a series that Craig and I did with volunteers last year. It's over 11 hours of content. It walks you through from nose to tail on deer ecology, how to pick a spot, gear that you're going to need. We even go through some butchering in the last one, and we had an open forum Q&A last year, as well as multiple videos on skinning and gutting a deer when all you've got is a knife. You know, you don't necessarily need a bone saw to do the stuff. You don't need a gambrel. You don't need a hoist. You don't like, you can do everything on the ground, and that's what we show in that. So all you need is a nice sharp knife and a little bit of time, and you can get it done. All of that stuff is on that deer hunting page. So it's a really good place to start. And again, if you want to get to it, we'll put the link in the chat a little bit later. But yeah, if you want to get to it, if you just do a search, whatever browser you're using, MNDNR deer hunting, and it should take you there. What's new for 2021? Well, if you check out page 8 on the rules and regs book, you know, there are special CWD rules in effect for several areas. Those are going to be on the pages 68 through 79 in the rules and regs. Again, we kind of had a conversation with Kelsey about this last week, so we're going to point folks towards that, but you know, be aware of what those changes are. CWD continues to evolve and change in the landscape, and we are evolving and changing our response to it. So, you know, moving forward, it's always going to be a good idea just to check in on that and make sure nothing's changed, or be aware of what has. One of the big things that's happened is kind of a labeling change. You know, the CWD zone names have been changed, so now we have a management zone, a control zone, and a surveillance zone. And those are kind of listed in order of decreasing intensity that we're applying to them as an agency. So our management, that's our highest intensity. Our control is a little step down, and then our surveillance is just kind of the border areas of where those hot spots are. Our bag limit labels have changed. We, you know, it's now, we now have bucks only. We have antlerless lottery. We have either sex. That was the former hunter's choice. And then we have a much more to the point 2 deer, 3 deer, and 5 deer limit for the bag limit labels. And some of the permit area boundaries have changed, and those are all available. You know, you can see exactly which permit area boundary has changed on that hunting DNR deer hunting landing page, as well as the make a plan. There's some important rules that are statewide, and then there's some other rules that are very specific to the particular deer permit area you are hunting. Please, please, please be aware of what the state's trespass law is. That's going to be on page 9 of the rules and regs book. The general info to go over is going to be on page 24, and some of the specific deer rules are going to be on page 58. Be aware of what shooting hours are. That can be a little finicky. Where you're at in the state, we have a nice table in the back of the book that tells you exactly what those are. The general rule of thumb is that the law is that it's a half hour before sunrise to a half hour after sunset. But be aware that, you know, we do incorporate daylight savings time into the tables that we have in our rules and regs book. So those times are the times. So you don't need to do any funny math or add or subtract or whatever. What's in those tables is what we need to go by. So if you just want to do a search for the MNDNR rules and regulations, it'll take you to our landing page for the rules and regs, and you can get the English version of the book. You can get those translated versions as well, and you can get to, everything's available as both PDF and a hard copy if you need it. Do not trespass. It's you know, as folks that are out in the woods hunting and fishing, you know, it's our responsibility to know where we're at and be aware of where we're at. The trespass law applies to all outdoor recreation, so please, please, please know where you're standing, know what you're allowed to do where you're at. You may not enter legally posted land or agricultural land without permission, and that's just full stop. So be aware of where you're at, be aware of what you're doing. a very closely related corollary to that is you may be on public land or a public right of way, but if you're within 500 feet of a building occupied by humans or livestock, you cannot discharge a firearm without written permission of the owner, occupant, or leasee of that building. So again, be aware of what's around you, be safe, know where you're at, where you're standing, what's around you. Before you take that shot, because it's a real good way to get into some hot water quickly, and it's unsafe. Specifically for deer, you are not allowed to hunt deer from the road right away or shoot over a road. So make sure you know where those roads are. You know, sometimes it can get a little confusing if you're in a new spot, maybe you're not quite familiar with it. You know, make sure you know where the roads are. Make sure you're off of a road before you take a shot. You know, it's not exactly it's not exactly a good sport to like just be driving along and pull over and pop a deer, and it's definitely illegal. So make sure you're aware of that. Make sure you know where you're standing, and that description, that detail is on page 58 of the rules and regs book. This is one that new hunters get hung up on, that catches them by surprise a lot, is which you can't text others about animal movements. And we're talking about deer here, but so if Craig and I are out hunting and we're on the stands together, and you know, I can't shoot him a text and say 5 deer coming your way. You know, like that's not allowed. I can sit there and say haven't seen anything, or I believe I did text him. You know, had a grouse, like stared eyeball to eyeball with a grouse for 45 minutes. You know, it just you can communicate and talk about what you're seeing, but you know, texting about movements is not legal. And Amber, you had a great way to put it. Could you share that with everybody?
Yeah, no problem. So basically what I like to tell people is that the deer aren't texting each other. So when they see a hunter in the stand, you know, on Bob's back 40 that morning, they don't let all their buddies know to avoid that field today. So I kind of think of it as fair chase, you know, and our new technology, we're very chatty. We like to communicate all the time about what we're doing. But when it comes to hunting, we can't use electronic devices to assist in the hunt.
Now, Amber, are you positive about that? Because I could swear when I'm out deer hunting, the turkeys are just everywhere, and they're telling the deer somehow to stay
You know,
away.
the turkeys, the red squirrels, the ravens, take your pick. But ultimately, you know, we're still going to call that fair chase.
All right, sounds good.
And it is legal after the take to text and say, I've got a deer down, I need some help.
Yep.
Yes,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yep.
Yep, it just shouldn't be relied on as far as party hunting goes. You should still be within close range to have an understanding of whether or not your party has shot the number of deer they have tags for. There shouldn't be a long group text message explaining how many deer you've taken and how many deer you have left. Otherwise, you are using that electronic communication to create that party to assist in that hunt. But it is okay that if you need a hand with a deer, or you know, you get down from your stand and you're asking for someone to come help you dress a deer, drag a deer, find a deer, by all means, you can communicate with your partners.
Mm-hmm.
Some other rules and regs for deer hunting. Amber just mentioned party hunting. You know, for folks that are new to this, that basically means, you know, Craig and I go out and we can, you know, if Craig sees 2 bucks and we're party hunting, he can shoot both of those bucks and I can give him my tag for that buck to cover that. So that's what party hunting means. It is a way to hunt. Like some people, you'll get big groups of folks out there and they're going through a property and they'll do deer drives and what have you. And you know, but it's always important. Make sure you know how many tags you have before you put a deer on the ground, because you don't want to get in a situation where a deer's on the ground and then all of a sudden nobody's got a tag for it. So it takes some coordination. It takes some thinking. It is allowable.
Yeah, it certainly is. And one thing that sometimes gets people into a little bit of trouble is they think they missed a deer. So they shot, but they thought they missed it. And then another deer is taken And later they realized they actually did hit that deer. It just didn't respond to that shot. So if you do take a shot, make sure that it is a clean miss before you go ahead to take another deer.
That's a great point. That is such a great point. Baiting deer is illegal, so don't do it. You know, it's just one of those things that if you have to ask, well, is this considered baiting? Then it's probably something to avoid, right? Like if you have to get into these hyper specific scenarios, well, you know, I happen to be carrying some seed corn and it just ripped a corner and blah blah. Like just if you have to rationalize it, it's probably not a good idea to go down that road. So just avoid it. Don't get into it. Don't bait. It's not something you want to do. And Amber, a lot of your time is spent dealing with that stuff, right?
Yeah, that is a lot of our time. And generally speaking, you shouldn't have any human influence on what the deer are doing as far as what they're feeding on. So even gathering up acorns and then putting them in a pile by your deer stand, even though acorns do exist naturally out there and you're actually just taking them from nature and moving them, you are influencing that activity, that feeding activity. So it would be considered a bait. Any food products at all. There's a lot of stuff that's being sold in stores, even in Minnesota where baiting is illegal. So just be sure that that you're aware of what's in there, and that just because it's sold in the store doesn't mean that it's legal to hunt over it. So a lot of our time is spent working bait cases, and that's one thing too that we like to encourage our hunters as they're out scouting or checking areas. When they start finding some of this evidence of bait, go ahead and give us a call, or you can give Tip, our turn and poachers line, a call. I'd say about half of my baiting cases are probably tip related versus ones I just find on my own.
And TIP stands for turn in poachers. You know, I've got that down there at the bottom of the slide. Report what you see. If you see a violation, if you're out walking in the woods and you come across a giant pile of corn, call it in, because if a CO happens to come by and you're standing there, the defense of I didn't put it there is a pretty that's not going to get you very far. So, you know, if you see something out in the woods, call it in. 1-800-652-9093. It's 24 hours a day. It's anonymous. You can even text it if you do hashtag TIP on your cell phone. Attractants are limited in some areas. This is, again, a reflection of the shifting CWD landscape. We're trying to reduce deer congregating. So, you know, in the counties that you see up on the screen right there, the single hash, kind of just the diagonal lines, are there is no deer feeding. You cannot feed deer. And in the double hash, the kind of the diamond shapes, you cannot feed deer or use attractants. So scent lures of any kind are not allowable in those areas. So please be aware of that when you're out there. I personally don't hunt with scent lures or attractants. It's just not something I've ever used, but I know a lot of people, it's what they do. So make sure it's allowable where you're going to be hunting. Again, it gets back to know where you're going to be, know how you're going to do it. Anything to elaborate on that, Amber?
It's similar to the baiting, but as far as it relates to the CWD, again, we're taking out that human influence on what's naturally occurring in the herd. So a lot of people are like, well, you know, there's their own attractant, then, you know, why can't I use an attractant? You know, obviously a doe and estrus is still going to urinate, you know, and it's like, okay, yes, I understand, but if we take out the human influence, then what's happening with the deer is happening naturally and not because of our activity.
Yeah. So those are kind of the big rules and regs to be aware of. I mean, make sure you read the regs book, make sure you go over it, make sure you look at what's pertinent to deer and deer hunting. But those are kind of the ones that frequently trip people up because they weren't tracking on it or they just weren't paying attention. So take a little bit of time, make sure you know where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing, and building off of where we're going to be. You know, the license that you buy is going to be influenced by, you know, where you're going to be. So I want to kind of go through how you buy a license, and start off with where you can buy it. You know, you can do a search for your MNDNR online license sales, and that'll take you to our online license sale portal. This is something that you can do. Seeing as how it's 3 days before opener, I would not recommend doing that if you're trying to go out on Saturday, because this has to go to our licensing center. They have to issue the license. They have to mail it back to you because you need a physical tag to go out deer hunting. So I would go to a vendor. I would go to a licensed vendor. And you can do a search for find an MNDNR licensed vendor, or you can call our information center and they will happily let you know where a nearby vendor is. But you need to know where you're going to hunt. So again, you need to know where you're going to be to do this stuff. To get a license, you need to be born before January 1st, 1980. So if you're a rapidly aging, almost fogey like myself, you don't need a firearms safety certificate. I would highly recommend, if you haven't taken it, to take it, but you don't necessarily need it. If you were born after January 1st, 1980, you need to have firearm safety for being 12 and above. If you're between 10 and 13, you need to be accompanied by an adult. If you are not able to get your firearm safety certification, you can hunt under an apprentice hunter validation, which we have that program in place. You can go out, you don't have to finish your firearm safety certification, but you do need to be with a licensed, experienced hunter, and you need to be basically not necessarily arm's reach, but you need to be within unaided verbal and visual communication of that person. And honestly, closer is probably better if you're out with somebody who's brand new and hasn't done firearm safety. So those are the options to get a license. You know, where to begin? Again, I keep saying it over and over again. I'm going to keep saying it. Where you want to hunt is going to determine what kind of firearm you can use. It's going to determine how long the season is for that area. It's going to determine how many deer, what deer, and how many you can harvest within deer permit areas. So kind of the first big decision that you need to make is, am I going to hunt statewide, or if for the normal season, the quote unquote normal season, or am I going to hunt in the Southeast during the late season towards the end of November? And that season is kind of caters to the folks that live in the Southeast, that maybe they're busy during the opener, the regular season, but they want to hunt later in the year. But it's a very restricted series. It's a very restricted part of the state. Most folks are going to pick that A option that covers our 100 series, our 200 series, and our 300 series. And I'll explain that in just a second. But you need to know right off the bat whether you're going to be hunting statewide or you're going to be restricted to the Southeast for that late season. Here is a map of our deer permit areas, and you can see our 100 series in gray, our 200 series in green, and then our rapidly shrinking 300 series is down in the Southeast in kind of that teal color. You know, there's a lot of information here, and there's a lot of complexity because Minnesota is a big state. You know, the habitat is not equal across the state. The deer herd is not equal across the state. And these DPAs, deer permit areas, they kind of give us the ability to manage locally to reflect the on-the-ground conditions and the needs of hunters for those areas. So if you get to our rules and regs landing page online, this map is available online. We have interactive maps and PDF maps, so you can click on a DPA and find out exactly how many deer are allowed to be taken out of there. You can find out recent conditions, you can find harvest reports, you can find hunter density numbers, all that stuff you can find by clicking on those interactive maps. Be aware of where the shotgun and rifle line is. For new hunters, when I came to Minnesota, I had not shotgun hunted for deer before. I was a rifle deer hunter. But being down here in the metro, everything south and west of that line is shotgun only. So that is a legal shotgun with single slug shells. So you cannot use any sort of pellets or buckshot. You can use a legal muzzle loading long gun, and you can use legal handguns. North and east of that line is kind of the rifle zone. So basically everything in the shotgun zone is legal up there, as well as legal rifles. And legal rifles are center fire rifles that are 22 caliber or greater. When Craig and I teach our learn to hunt classes, we always recommend folks go with at least a 243. That's kind of the smallest caliber that Craig and I are comfortable recommending for deer hunting. And Craig, did you want to speak to anything about that?
You know, you should match the cartridge to the animal you're pursuing. And a lot of those smaller calibers, the bullets are designed to fracture on impact, and you're not going to get the penetration that you need to get in that cavity on a big game animal. So, you know, take a look at the game you're pursuing, and that 243 crosses over really nice for varmint hunting in the winter and becomes a deer rifle in the fall. So that's why we go with that one.
Yeah. And it's a great round. It'll shoot flat. It'll cover, it'll cover some decent long farm field shots, and it'll do okay with up close woods hunting too. So start there, and it also depends on the shooter. There's some folks that, once you get into a 30-06 or bigger, they just, they're recoil sensitive and they don't like it. So whatever you decide to use, please take the time to get proficient with it, get comfortable. Being out on the deer stand is not the time to figure out where the safety is on the firearm. So make sure you are okay operating it. Take a little bit of time. You've still got 3 days to get it to a range, put some rounds through it, make sure you know what it's gonna do when you pull the trigger, because you don't want to have to be thinking about that stuff when the deer's coming in. You want to be focused on the shot. You want to make an ethical shot. You want to make sure that you can put that animal down as quickly and humanely as possible. So it's not the time to be figuring out your gear. So please take the time to get proficient with what you're going to use. Bag limits. Now again, there's a lot of colors on here, and again, it reflects the differences around the state. Bag limits for our DPAs can vary. Those cream color DPAs up in the north and northeast, that's a 1 deer limit bucks only unit. So you cannot shoot an antlerless deer up there. All of the blue that you see on here is an antlerless permit lottery. Now, if you don't know what that means, then you've missed the lottery and it doesn't matter. And those blue units are de facto buck only units at this point. If you're interested in hunting an antlerless deer in those areas in the future, pay attention next year, because next August the lottery goes into effect, and they'll close that lottery out at the end of next summer. And if you win that lottery, you can get an antlerless permit for that area. But if you haven't put in for that lottery, that is a bucks only unit as of now. The brown areas are a 1 deer limit of either sex, so you can take a buck or an antlerless in those areas, and you don't necessarily need a special permit for it. And then we get into our multi-deer units. We've got our 2 deer limit with the salmon color, the pink color. We've got our 3 deer unit in the green, and our 5 deer limit in the purple. So statewide, once you buy your license, you can hunt anywhere in the state. If you are in a unit that is a 2 deer, 3 deer, or 5 deer limit, you can buy bonus permits that allow you to take additional animals. But you're not restricted specifically to the unit. Now, you're going to be asked which unit you're going to be hunting predominantly, and that's a way for us to keep track of who's going where and get a estimate for hunting intensity. But you're not restricted to just that unit. Statewide, you're restricted to having 5 deer. So whether it's you use up all your permits in a 5 deer limit unit, or you go up to a bucks only unit and or you get a handful of bonus permits in a 2 deer or 3 deer, and then you finally go up to the Northwoods to get one of those big Northwoods monsters with your buck tag. You can mix and match that way, but it's always a good idea if you're going to be hunting multiple deer and get multiple antlerless, get those bonus permits first, have them in your pocket before you put them on the ground. And if you want to save that main tag for a buck tag, that's a good way to move forward. Is that reasonable, Craig and Amber? Is that a decent strategy?
Yeah, I think that's real good. And
Yeah, and I know there was a question about the antlerless lottery permit areas, about being drawn for it if that allows you to then have 2 deer. It's still a 1 deer limit in the lottery area. It just allows you to shoot an antlerless deer versus a buck. And those are able to be party hunted with. So if somebody, if I get drawn for the lottery and I'm out hunting with Jeff and Jeff didn't get drawn, as long as we're out legally party hunting, he can shoot a doe, and then we can use my doe permit for that. So that is transferable that way. However, if you're in an area and you have a hunter who can get a doe either for disability reasons or because they're a youth hunter, just remember that is not transferable. Those don't party hunt. For youth can shoot either a antlerless or a buck in the 1 deer limit areas, except the bucks only. That's why it's called bucks only. But an adult would not be able to shoot that youth steer.
Right. And the nice thing is that most of those special seasons are done. Amber, you're kind of breaking up on us a little bit, but we'll see if we can't get the internets to cooperate here a little bit better. Again, the differences here, it reflects the differences of what's on the ground. You know, those 1 deer limit areas, you know, we're trying to build up those deer populations, and those multi-deer limits, we're trying to bring those down to meet management goals. So all of this is reflection on the needs and the ecology of the situation. So
James,
yeah, go ahead,
can
Benji.
you go back? There was a question in the Q&A about the dark line on that map and what that might represent. If you're to get that while you're on there.
The dark lines around the borders with the purple area, some of the purple areas.
Yeah, some of the purple areas, and it looks like it kind of runs all the way from like 604 all the way up north past Red Lake up there.
Yeah. I mean, those are, I'm not aware of any special significance of that bolded line. Are you, Benji?
That's kind of what I thought too, but I saw it in the Q&A. I thought I'd ask you why you had the map up. So,
Amber, is there a specific reason for that extra bold?
Well, I didn't get to draw the map, so
No, I know. I think it may be a function of the display that we've got right now. So I appreciate them picking up on that amount of detail, but it doesn't
it
correspond
looks like
with.
it's between the 100 series and the 200 series. There's the
Oh yeah, it could be.
one line.
Yep, that's
and
a
then it kind of
great
surrounds.
observation.
Yeah, the 600s and then
Yep.
the 300. So it's kind of just the different series zones.
Okay, awesome, great observation. Yeah, that does follow the 100, 200, and 300 zone demarcations. Great. We kind of talked about, you know, your main license is good for anywhere in the state. You know, it's the only license you're going to need for bucks only lottery and the either sex, but you do need to go out and get additional bonus permits for those 2, 3, and 5 deer limits. You know, when you get that animal on the ground, you know, you're going to detach your tag and your license, and you're going to notch the time, date, and month for the site tag and attach it to your deer. And this is a really important thing. I think a lot of folks, once they get an animal on the ground, there's a lot of adrenaline. You're thinking about a lot of stuff. Maybe you're crunched for time because you did it late and you don't want to be out in the woods until 3 in the morning. Tag your deer before you move it. You can enjoy the moment. You can have that let that adrenaline run out of you. Sit there and just admire it, or have whatever moment you need to have. But before you move it at all, you need to tag it so that that's a legal animal. And then really quickly, I want to wrap this up so that we can get into the Q&A. License purchase and validity, you need to have that license ahead of time. So it doesn't do you much good to go in on opening day and get a license, because you're going to have to wait until the next day before that's a valid license. So get it ahead of time and make sure you have it. If you're going to get bonus permits, make sure you have those ahead of time and maybe get a couple. If you're going to be hunting in an area that you can get 2 or 3 deer, get a couple. They're not expensive at all. But again, you need to have them ahead of time. So you are not, if you get 1 deer on the ground and then you get another deer on the ground and you don't have a bonus tag in your pocket, that is not a good situation to be in. You don't want to have that happen. So they are not valid until the following day when you purchase them after shooting hours. So make sure you have them, get them early, get a couple, cover your bases, and be aware of that. Know your target. Just really quickly, this whole time we've been talking about bucks and antlerless deer. An antlerless deer can be a male deer. It can be a buck fawn that just hasn't had enough of an antler grow. So the definition of a legal buck is 1 antler is at least 3 inches long. Otherwise, it's considered antlerless. It needs to be polished. Needs to be polished antlers. So it needs to be out of the velvet. This can trip up people every once in a while. And my rule of thumb is, I use the ear as a reference point. If that antler is longer than the ear, it's going to be longer than 3 inches. If it's not, then it's not 3 inches, and that's not considered a buck. So if I'm in a buck only area, I got to let it go. And if it's too hard to tell, then just let it go, because it's not worth making a mistake over. So with that, we're going to transition into questions. I'm going to close out the PowerPoint so that I can see some of the questions that are coming in. But I just want to make sure that everybody, focus on being safe, focus on being smart, and focus on being ethical, and you can have a tremendous time out there in the woods, and it's a great experience. So with that, I'm going to end the slideshow, and we'll get into some Q&A.
Okay, just a reminder, if you got a question, put it in the Q&A. We got a lot of stuff that came into the chat, so I'm going to try and cover those first, and I won't go back to chat after we get through these. So we got the first one was from Jerry. He wants to know, can you define a party if some have rifles and others have archery equipment? And that's 2 separate parties. That's the easy answer, isn't it, Amber?
Yeah, that's correct. So the party is defined by the license that they're hunting under. So whether it's a firearms license, archery license, or muzzleloader license. And then they would have to be using that weapon system for that license. So they need to match up to be part of a party.
Okay. Jerry wants to know if party rules apply on private land.
They most certainly do. They apply on private and public land alike.
Okay. Roger is asking, please define if no baiting is allowed at any time or less than 10 days before season.
So the baiting law does say that all food product must be completely removed 10 days prior to it being hunted. So it's considered to still be baited. So if you're in an area that allows deer feeding, for example, and you're feeding the deer, all of that food product needs to be completely removed. Every single kernel, grain, whatever it is, completely removed for 10 full days before that area can be hunted.
Matt wants to know, do I have to harvest a deer within the zone where I purchased my deer tag? And if you buy the all season license, you can hunt statewide. A question on apprenticed hunting license, and it's not an apprentice hunting license, it's an apprenticed hunter validation, and you still have to buy a license after you get that apprentice hunter validation. It's just a written promise that you're going to hunt with a adult licensed hunter, correct?
I think there's a question in the chat on that, Craig, too, on who has to sign that validation.
Yes, that's correct. It allows.
No, we lost Amber. Give her a second.
The validation is signed by the hunter, but that just allows you to go hunt even though you don't have firearm safety yet.
Right, but you still got to buy a license. You get one and then you get the other one. The next one's from Jerry, and he'd like us to recommend to get the lead out. And James and I use copper ammunition for all of our hunting programs. James uses it at out in the field as well, and I've got some copper on hand. It's been difficult this year to find copper ammo.
Yeah, we in our programming, we definitely we use lead at the range, and we get people comfortable with it, with those firearms and with shooting and safe practices. But we use copper in all of our hunting programs here at the DNR, so that's definitely something that we encourage. Me personally, I just don't hunt with lead. It's just not something I do. It's not something I want in my meat or on the land or feed it to my family. So that's my personal choice. And you know, before the pandemic, it was you know, prices were actually coming down on that stuff. You could get a box of 20 of 30-06 ammo for maybe $30, 32, 33. Now now it's hard to find ammo anywhere. So copper, otherwise, I mean, it's been hard for probably the last 6 months.
We found 30-30s online, you and I.
we did find some 30-30 ammo. You know, some good old Remington core locks that somebody was selling for $50. So it's, you know, it is it is bare cupboards these days. So if you've got it, you can find it, get it. And if you got a buddy that needs some, you know, help them out, because it's tough. It's tough sledding out there.
Scott's question is, regardless of where you hunt, your limit for shooting a buck is only one. So it's one buck statewide. Your multiple deer areas, one buck, and it could be the other one could be a doe, or the other two could be a doe, or the other four could be a doe. You can also use your mainframe license in that area for an antlerless deer if you're in a 5 deer or 3 deer or 2 deer area. How can you tell if a deer is 1+ years old? This would be great to know, since some DPAs require a 1-year-old deer to be tested for CWD. And I can handle that one real quick. We're going to look at the jaw, and we're going to look at the tooth development. And at 6 months of age, they've only got certain number of teeth. Once they get to that 1 year, they've got an extra tooth in there, and that's how you tell if it's a 1-year-old or over. Okay, I think that's all the questions in the chat. Now we're going to jump over to the Q&A, and some of these have been answered online already. Is it legal for someone to start shooting target practice on their own property adjacent to a hunting area the morning of deer opener. Every year, our group of hunters hears one of the neighbors' property doing this for an hour or more as soon as gun season comes up.
I'll go ahead and tackle that one.
Thank you.
So 5 days before season until 2 days after season. Only licensed hunters can be afield with those firearms. So any target shooting, or a lot of times this time of year, this week, I get a lot of questions about wanting to sight in rifles. That needs to be happening on a range. So if you have that problem, it likely could get into some hunter harassment issues where maybe it's time to have a local CO get involved.
Perfect. For those that are required a firearm safety certificate, do we need to have a card with us? Firearm safety is no longer printed or on enhanced driver's license. Apparently the driver's license system still shows we have it, but it isn't printed on the card.
Yeah, you don't need to have that with you, because if you have a valid hunting license, that means that you have firearm safety. So
Perfect.
you can't have the license without having a firearm safety. So you don't need to have it with you anymore. And I understand some people like to have that printed on their driver's license, but there was a little panic that happened when some of these enhanced licenses came out.
I think that was a follow-up to that same question. The next one, got a bunch, so just hang on. Do I have to harvest a deer within the zone that I purchased my deer tag? I think that was a carryover from the chat. So we know that, yeah, you can hunt statewide. It doesn't have to be in that deer permit area. You just have to match your harvest to what that deer permit area is allowing. Oh, here's a good question from Steve. Where can I get copper ammo? And we've seen a little bit online, but wasn't it $109 for a box of 30-30s we've seen, James?
For copper, yeah.
Yeah. So they're really proud of that.
For a box of 20.
Yeah. The dark line, we talked about that one. Oh, here's a question. A couple of years ago, I switched to no lead ammunition. Can the DNR encourage this? And like James and I said, we both encourage people to use non-toxic ammo, but it's not a requirement. Okay. Can I take my 1 deer limit and shoot 2 deer in a 2 deer limit zone? So he's hunting in a 1 deer limit area. He shoots his deer. Can he then go and buy a bonus tag in an area that's open for more than 1 deer? Can you hear us, Amber?
I'm sorry, there you are. So yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit, where your license that you're purchasing is just where you're intending to hunt, so we get a good idea of where hunter numbers are at, densities, so to speak. But you can still get a bonus tag in a 2 deer zone and go ahead and hunt 2 deer in that area.
Okay, those are answered. John, I'm not sure what you meant by 100 versus 200 area.
I think they were responding to us trying to figure out what the bold lines on the map were.
Okay. Let's see. Can you use a dog to pull out a carcass? Dog stays in the car while hunting, then dog used after the deer is shot to drag it out.
Yes, and this is actually something that has changed over the last few years. You can use a dog to help track a deer as well, as long as the deer is already down. So you're not using the dog to hunt the deer, you're not using the dog to corral the deer, herd the deer, anything like that. Dogs not part of the hunt, but can assist with the retrieval.
So we got a question here about using salt that's leached into the soil from a salt block. Is that area considered baited, I guess is his question.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing that one, but we do get this question frequently where they are using a bait block, so to speak, and some of that content has leached into the ground, or they're using a fine powder or buck jam, which is a liquid. You would basically have to dig up the dirt in that area. It would have to no longer contain any of those food or artificial flavoring items or any of those pieces. As far as salt and mineral, you have to be using those in an area that it's allowed, first of all, and that's not actually bait. If it's straight salt and mineral blocks, those are not defined as bait. And it's pretty well cleared out in the regulations book. There's a special page just referring to bait that defines it pretty clearly for us.
If hunting public land, does a single hunter from a stand have to choose a rifle or a shotgun? Can said hunter only have one weapon in possession?
You can have multiple weapons as long as the license that you're hunting with matches up with the weapons that you're using or that you have possession of. So if you're hunting under an archery license, for example, you cannot be in possession of a firearm and then just say you're archery hunting.
Are there any special regulations for hunting in state forest or wildlife management areas? Can we walk, hunt, or are we required to have a tree stand? Can we shoot horizontally or must we shoot down? Deer Permit Area 100s.
So that's kind of a extensive question about wildlife management areas in general. There are extra regulations that are laid out in the regulation book. I definitely will have you take a look at that. There's certain wildlife management areas that have certain requirements where other ones don't. So depending on where you're hunting, that is very good to know. But generally speaking, you can't leave stands overnight in wildlife management areas. And I think that's probably the biggest difference for deer hunting, as well as not being able to use any ATVs for retrieving big game animals or for setting up stands.
Okay. Matt was successful in finding 243 copper, so he's a happy camper. What's the process after a deer is shot? Where do you take it for CWD testing and processing? How much time do you have? So I don't know if they're talking about the registration process after you tag your deer. Well, maybe you can tackle that one first.
Sure. Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit with Kelsey. You know, one thing, there's two separate things that are in play here. One, you have to register your deer after you shoot it. And then if it's within a CWD zone, there are other special rules, like there can be carcass restrictions,
Yeah,
movement restrictions.
yeah, I'm not sure if I completely understand the question, but the register.
Oh, Amber's hung up on us again.
Yeah.
There she is, maybe. Yeah, so I just posted our CWD page in the chat, along with a bunch of other links that I've been putting in there. But that tells you and shows you, if you're hunting in a CWD zone, what you can do, what's allowable, where you have movement restrictions. So And it's something to be aware of if you're driving down to one of those zones and there's a movement restriction boundary. So around the management zones and the control zones, there's typically a movement restriction boundary. You know, you can't bring that animal out of there without it, you know, as an intact animal. You have to quarter it out. You have to bone out the meat. I mean, quarters are fine. You don't have to completely bone it out, but there are restrictions on what you can take out of that area. Now, if you live in that area, you know, that's not that much of a hassle. But if you don't live in that area, you know, you need to make sure that you're complying with what the rules are for that area.
There's a question on camping on state forest land. What things should we consider if we want to camp near where we're going to hunt so we don't have such a long drive in the morning? Dispersed camping on state forests.
So the dispersed camping is going to be a first come, first serve. And then just, you know, things to consider obviously would be fire safety, being environmentally friendly, so you're not leaving trash or other debris behind you. Items can be left on state forest land up to 14 days. And so that tends to be our general rule of thumb with camping, dispersed camping on state forest land.
Perfect. Can I use a bonus tag in a hunter's choice area?
No, bonus tags are only going to be used in areas that are 2 deer limits or more.
How many teeth does a 1-year-old deer have? I'm assuming they're asking deer. There's some really good charts out online that will show you the jawbone of a deer and the teeth that they have at certain ages. So that would be the easiest way to look that up. I don't have a chart here right in front of me.
My recollection is that a yearling deer has 6 teeth on each side, usually.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, somebody call me out. But that's that. I'm trying to dig deep on my vertebrate anatomy.
Okay. Can a bow hunter carry a pistol, Amber?
If they do have a permit to carry, then they can carry a pistol with them while they're bow hunting. Otherwise, they would not be able to do that.
Okay. And hunting and trapping regulations are available in Hmong, Somali. Oh, in Spanish, and they gave the web address. So I'm not. Oh, Jeff put that in there. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, so in the chat, I put the landing page for our hunting rules and regs, and you can get to all of our translated materials via the chat. Those links are up.
Okay, one last question just popped up. Does my 10-year-old need to be with when I purchase their license?
Yes, they do. So anybody purchasing their own license has to be present to make that purchase. The same thing is coming up with fishing licenses. There's obviously been a few changes for us to make sure that that's working even on our combination licenses. So yes, to purchase a license, they need to be present.
Okay, I think we got through all of the questions, James, and we're 1 minute to the hour.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up. Amber, thank you so much for taking time. I know it's a busy time of year for everybody in enforcement. It's kind of like you said, it's Super Bowl Eve. You guys are running pretty ragged these days, but really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us again this year. And Craig, thank you as well for imparting your knowledge. And y'all, you know, have a good, safe opener out there. And if there are any more questions or anything comes up, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll try to get it done. So thank you so much. And so Craig, if you could stop the recording and take us into the green room, we'll wrap it up. So bye everybody.